What if someone's name just disappeared overnight from something as serious as a will? No warning, no explanation, just gone. Because that's exactly what people are now claiming happened involving Charlie Kirk and Erika. At first, it sounded too extreme to be real. Wills aren't casual documents. They don't just change without reason. But then something changed. Whispers turned into screenshots, and screenshots turned into questions no one could ignore. And this is where it gets strange. The timing. Because this didn't happen in isolation. It came right after a series of tensions people were already watching closely. So now the question isn't just, did it happen? It's why. To understand why this situation feels so intense, you have to look at the people at the center of it and what they represent. Charlie Kirk isn't just a public figure. He's built an entire network around influence, leadership, and long-term positioning through Turning Point USA. Everything tied to him tends to feel structured, intentional, and carefully managed. And then there's Erika, someone who, over time, seemed to move closer into that orbit. Not overnight, but steadily. More visibility, more proximity, more presence in spaces connected to Charlie's world. It didn't look unusual at first. People rise, people connect, that's normal. But then, something changed. People started noticing how fast certain things were happening. Not just growth, but access. Moments where Erika seemed to be positioned in ways that usually take years to build toward. Subtle, but enough to raise eyebrows if you were paying attention. And this is where it gets strange. Around the same time, small tensions started appearing. Nothing explosive, just shifts. Less interaction, fewer visible connections. Moments where things felt slightly off compared to before. At first, most people ignored it, because without something concrete, it's easy to assume nothing's wrong. But here's the problem. When something as serious as a will enters the conversation, everything changes. Because that's not casual. That's personal. That's long-term. And if someone's name was really removed from something like that, it suggests a decision, a deliberate one. And that's what made people start digging. Because now, this wasn't just about online interactions or public perception. It was about something deeper. Something that doesn't change unless something significant happens. And once that idea took hold, the attention shifted fast. Because people weren't just asking what happened publicly anymore. They were asking what happened privately. And that's where the story really begins. It didn't start with an official document. No legal filing, no public confirmation, just a post. Short, vague, easy to ignore. At first, the post claimed that a recent update to something connected to Charlie Kirk no longer included Erika's name. No proof attached, no explanation, just the statement. Most people scrolled past it. Because honestly, that kind of claim sounds extreme. Wills aren't something people casually talk about online, and they definitely aren't something that just leaks without context. But then, something changed. A second post appeared. Different account, same claim. But this time, there was a screenshot. Blurry, cropped. Not enough to fully confirm anything, but enough to make people pause. Because now, it wasn't just a statement. It was something visual. And this is where it gets strange. People started comparing the screenshot to older information that had circulated before, not widely known, but referenced in certain discussions. And while nothing matched perfectly, there were similarities. Formatting, structure, enough to raise questions. But here's the problem. The screenshot still didn't prove anything. It didn't show the full document. It didn't explain when the change happened. It didn't even confirm it was real. And that gap? It made everything worse. Because when people don't have full information, they start filling in the blanks. And it doesn't stop there. A third post surfaced. This one didn't show anything new, but it added context. It claimed the change wasn't recent, that it had happened quietly, and that no one noticed until now. That detail hit differently. Because, if true, it meant this wasn't a reaction to something happening today. It was a decision made earlier. A decision that stayed hidden. And that raised a bigger question. Why keep it quiet? Because if something like that changes, there's usually a reason, and not a small one. And this is where the tension started building. People began looking at timelines again, not just recent events, but weeks, even months back. Moments where interactions between Charlie and Erika seemed to shift. Moments where visibility dropped. Moments where connection felt different, subtle, but noticeable in hindsight. And weirdly, they started lining up. But then, something changed again. Someone pointed out a specific moment. A public appearance where Erika was expected, but didn't show. At the time, no one thought much of it. Now, it felt important. Because when people compared that moment to the supposed timing of the change, it matched. And suddenly, everything started connecting. Because now, this wasn't just about a document. It was about a sequence. Something happened. Then something shifted. Then something changed. And now, people were trying to figure out what that first something was. But the biggest twist? No one involved had said anything. No confirmation. No denial. Nothing from Erika. Nothing from Charlie. And in situations like this, silence doesn't calm things down. It amplifies everything. Because now, every detail matters. Every past interaction, every absence, every shift in tone, all of it gets pulled into the story. And once that happens, there's no going back. But just when people thought they were piecing things together, another detail surfaced. And this one, it didn't just raise questions. It made everything feel a lot more serious. The next detail didn't come from a screenshot. It came from a timeline shift. Someone noticed that around the same period, people were claiming Erika's name had been removed. Something else changed too quietly. No announcement, no explanation, just a pattern. Charlie Kirk stopped interacting with Erika publicly. Not gradually, abruptly. And this is where it gets strange. Before that point, there were visible connections, mentions, appearances, overlapping spaces tied to Turning Point USA. Nothing overly obvious, but consistent enough to notice. Then suddenly, nothing. No tags. No response. No shared visibility. And when people mapped that shift against the rumored timing of the will change, it lined up almost perfectly. But here's the problem. Public interaction doesn't prove anything. People stop interacting all the time. That alone doesn't explain something as serious as being removed from a will. So the question got bigger. What happened behind the scenes? And it doesn't stop there. A clip resurfaced. Not recent. Months old. In it, Charlie is speaking casually, answering questions. At one point, Erika's name comes up briefly. Nothing major. But his reaction? Slightly different. There's a pause. A shift in tone. He answers, but not fully. At the time, no one noticed. Now, people couldn't stop replaying it. Because it felt like something was being held back. And that one moment started gaining traction fast. Because now, people weren't just looking at what happened recently. They were looking for signs that this had been building for a while. And weirdly, they started finding them. Moments where things felt slightly off. Comments that didn't fully connect. Interactions that seemed more distant than expected. Individually, nothing definitive. But together, it started forming a pattern. And that's when things started falling apart even faster. Because now, another claim surfaced. This one didn't talk about the will directly. It talked about a fallout, a disagreement, something that changed how certain people were positioned internally. No details, no proof. But the timing? Again, it matched. And suddenly, everything shifted. Because now, the story wasn't just about a document. It was about a relationship, a shift from alignment to separation. And this is where the tension really escalated. Because people started asking a different question. Not, did it happen? But what caused it? And that question hit harder. Because something big enough to trigger that kind of change doesn't just happen quietly. There's a reason. There's a moment. There's a turning point. But no one knew what it was. And that uncertainty, it pulled more people in. Because now, It felt like there was a missing piece, something that explained everything but hadn't surfaced yet. And just when people thought they were getting closer, another detail dropped. And this one, it didn't just suggest tension. It suggested something went seriously wrong. The next detail didn't come from a post. It came from someone claiming to have been close enough to see what happened without being part of it directly. Not a big name, not verified, but the way they described things felt specific. And that's what made people stop. Because instead of vague hints, they talked about a moment, a turning point, something that changed everything between Erika and Charlie Kirk almost instantly. And this is where it gets strange. They didn't describe a public incident. They described a private disagreement, something that happened behind the scenes. According to them, it wasn't loud, not explosive, no big argument that spilled out into public view. It was quiet, but serious. The kind of situation where trust shifts and doesn't come back. But here's the problem. They didn't say what the disagreement was about, just that it involved expectations not being met and lines being crossed. And that ambiguity, it made everything worse. Because now, people started imagining what could cause that level of shift. And it doesn't stop there. The same source hinted that after that moment, things moved fast. Decisions were made. Positions changed. Access was reduced. And suddenly, everything people had been noticing started making sense. The drop in interaction, the absence from certain spaces, the shift in tone, it wasn't random. It was the result of something. But then something changed again. The source added one more detail. And this is where things took a darker turn. They suggested that the disagreement wasn't just personal. It involved something bigger. Something connected to how things were being handled internally around Turning Point USA. That line hit hard. Because now, this wasn't just about two people. It was about decisions, structure, possibly even reputation. And that raised the stakes instantly. Because if something internal triggered this, then the removal from the will, if true, wasn't just emotional. It was deliberate, calculated. But here's the part that really changed everything: the timing. According to the source, the disagreement happened before the public started noticing anything. Meaning everything people saw later, the distance, the silence, the shift, was after the decision had already been made. And suddenly, the timeline flipped. Because now, the will change wasn't the reaction. It was part of the outcome. And that's when things started falling apart in a bigger way. Because people began connecting everything again. That missed appearance, that awkward clip, that sudden silence. It all pointed back to one moment, one event that no one had fully seen. And that's what made this situation feel so intense. Because the most important part of the story was the part no one could confirm. And that's where the tension peaked. Because now, people weren't just asking what happened. They were asking why it hasn't been explained. Why both sides stayed quiet. Why something this serious was never addressed directly. And just when it felt like the story couldn't get more serious, it did. Because now, it wasn't just observers piecing things together. People closer to the situation started reacting. And that's when everything escalated. And that's when everything stopped feeling like quiet speculation and started looking like a full-blown shift happening in real time. Because now, it wasn't just timelines and anonymous claims. It was behavior, visible behavior. People connected to Turning Point USA began making subtle but very noticeable moves. Not announcements, not statements, just quiet changes. Old photos featuring Erika? Gone. Mentions? Removed. Tags? Cleared. And this is where it gets strange. None of it was explained. No one said why. But the pattern was too consistent to ignore. Because when multiple people make the same move at the same time, it usually means something shifted behind the scenes. And it doesn't stop there. Someone who had previously worked closely around Charlie Kirk posted a message. Not emotional, not dramatic, just one line. People think distance is random. It's not. That line spread fast. Because now, it didn't feel like coincidence anymore. It felt intentional. But then something changed. Erika finally reacted. Not with a full explanation. Not with a denial. Just a post. Short. Controlled. She wrote, "Not everything that changes needs to be explained publicly." That's it. But that one line, it shifted everything. Because now, it wasn't silence anymore. It was acknowledgement. Subtle but clear. And instantly, people split. Some saw it as confidence. Others saw it as avoidance. And that division, it made the story bigger. Because now, it wasn't just about what happened. It was about how people interpreted it. And this is where things started falling apart fast. Because right after that post, another reaction appeared. Indirect, but impossible to ignore. Someone close to Charlie's circle replied to a comment with, "Some decisions aren't about explanation, they're about protection." That line hit differently, because now the tone changed. From curiosity to seriousness. Because if something is about protection, then something must have happened. And that raised the stakes instantly. Because now, people weren't just asking what changed. They were asking what needed to be protected. And from who? And it doesn't stop there. Another clip resurfaced. Old. Almost forgotten. In it, Charlie Kirk is speaking about trust. He says, "Once trust is broken, you don't always get a second chance." At the time, general advice. Now, it felt personal. And once that clip started circulating again, the tension hit its peak. Because now, everything pointed in one direction. Not clearly, but strongly, that something serious had happened. Something that changed how people saw each other. And something that led to decisions being made quietly, but firmly. And the biggest one, possibly removing someone from something as serious as a will. But here's the problem. Still no confirmation. No official statement. No direct explanation. Just fragments. Hints. Reactions. And that's what made it worse. Because the more people saw, the more it felt like something bigger was still being held back. Like everything so far was just the surface. And then, the biggest twist hit. Not a post. Not a reaction. Something deeper. A piece of information that didn't just suggest a change, it explained why it might have happened. And if what people are saying about it is true, then everything we've seen so far was leading to this. And then, the piece that changed how people saw everything finally surfaced. Not a screenshot, not a vague post. Something described as part of a formal update details about how certain decisions were structured around long-term planning connected to Charlie Kirk. Not the full document, but enough information circulating that people could piece together what mattered. And what stood out wasn't just that a name was removed, it was how it was removed. And this is where it gets strange. The update reportedly wasn't emotional. It was structured, deliberate, framed around realignment. That word kept coming up. Not conflict, not fallout. Realignment. And that changes everything. Because realignment isn't reactive. It's intentional. It suggests a shift in direction. A decision about the future, not just the past. But here's the problem. Another detail came with it. The change wasn't isolated. It was part of a broader adjustment, meaning other elements were updated too. Position, roles, connections. And suddenly, the story got bigger. Because now, this wasn't just about Erika. It was about a wider shift happening behind the scenes. And it doesn't stop there. One part of the information referenced long-term trust structures. That phrase hit hard, because it suggested that decisions like this weren't based on one moment, but on how someone fits into a bigger plan. And that's where everything clicked. The timeline, the distance, the silence, the reactions. It all pointed to one thing. A decision had been made. Not suddenly, not emotionally, but gradually, and then finalized. And that's the reveal. Not that something dramatic exploded overnight, but that something changed over time, until it reached a point where it couldn't stay the same anymore. And once that point was reached, the decision followed. Quiet. structured, and final. And if that's true, then the real story isn't just that a name disappeared. It's why it no longer belonged there. When you step back and look at everything together, the timeline shifts, the silence, the reactions, and now this idea of realignment, the story stops being about just Erika. It becomes about how decisions are made behind the scenes. Because what this situation really shows isn't just about Charlie Kirk or someone being removed from something important. It's about trust, long-term trust, and how quickly it can change. Think about it. Something like a will isn't about the present moment. It's about the future. It's about who stays part of that future and who doesn't. And this is where it hits deeper. The fragments we've seen don't point to one dramatic event. They point to a shift, a gradual change that built over time, until it reached a point where a decision had to be made. And once that decision was made, everything else followed. The distance, the silence, the subtle reactions, all of it. And that's what makes this uncomfortable, because it suggests that what people saw publicly was only the surface, while something much more important was happening privately. And maybe that's why no one has fully explained it. Because some decisions aren't meant to be debated. They're meant to be finalized. And when that happens, the reasons don't always get shared, but the outcome always does. So now everything comes down to one question. What really caused that shift? Because if something as serious as this changed quietly, then whatever happened behind the scenes must have mattered more than anything we saw publicly. And that's what makes this so intense. Was this about one moment, or a series of decisions that built over time? And why has no one fully explained it? Drop your thoughts below. What do you think really happened here? And if you want more deep dives into stories like this, make sure you subscribe, because sometimes the biggest changes aren't the ones you hear about. They're the ones you notice after everything's already